invite everybody in attendance to stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming out and braving the ice storm. We're going to start off this evening with, since we have no public hearings, with the presentation item. Presentation item number 1 is a golf course update. At the last council meeting, after the presentation, we did allow for some comments. That's not something we normally do for presentation items, and not something that we will do this evening, especially since public comments follows presentation. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Parks and Recreation Director Scott Geer. Is your microphone?
Try it again. Try.
Can you hear me at all back there? No?
Try it again.
Yeah, if you turn.
Hello? Right, can you hear me now?
It's coming better. If we can get it up a little more without the feedback.
Hello, test, 1, 2, 1, 2.
Better?
Can you hear me better now? Back there? All right.
Yeah.
Excellent.
It's too far.
Might be a little too far.
Bridge too far.
There we go.
Anyway, several council meetings ago, presenting that information, in combination of the golf course and sports tours and whatnot. At that time, you all had asked for us to go back and assess, the golf course operations and the course itself, and then come back to you and give you some of that information. So that's what this presentation is tonight. And so I'm just going to go ahead and get started. Basically what we've done is we're getting an assessment of our current situation. Oh, I don't know what to do. There we go. What we did was we had a USGA playability assessment. We had an irrigation assessment and inventory completed. We had some other city inspections done. We had operations review, although that information is a little bit limited. And then also want to provide you with just a summary and some recommendations. I know that a lot of this information is in the council packet, a lot of detail, so I'm not going to regale you with tons of detail or anything like that. I'm just going to kind of give you a rundown of where things are. Hopefully you've had an opportunity to look at it. But the USGA said, in general, course conditions are lacking by today's standards, resulting from years of deferred maintenance and limited investment to infrastructure. Immediate changes are needed to avoid further asset decline. Additionally, since quick fixes seldom result in permanent improvement, some of the recommendations may not be easy to implement and can take more than a single season to produce the desired results. Some of what they're attributing there is right now, if you decided you were going to go and improve the green, you might be a little bit challenged, given that it's winter time and some things like that. So some of these things cannot occur overnight. The USGA playability report looked at several aspects. It looked at the greens. It looked at tees, fairways, and the rough. They looked at cart paths, assessed the trees that are on the course, and then they looked at maintenance equipment and the maintenance program. In regards to the greens, again, there's a lot of detail in the packet, but things related to moisture management, disease, dollar spot, brown patch, It's contributing to a lot of the issues. There's grubs and things like that in the greens, which then means the wildlife likes to dig up the greens and eat them. So, that poses some challenges, but they also took core samples of some greens and identified that some of the greens that core samples were taken from actually had some decent root growth. However, you can tell when you take that core sample that not necessarily the aeration's happening on a regular basis. But given the circumstances, they did note that. In regards to the irrigation report, EC Consulting out of Iowa, who specializes in irrigation systems, inspected the course and the system. And they say the overall state of the system is worse than a normal system of the same age. The system was outdated when originally designed and installed. Control system and sprinklers are all aged with poor operation. There are numerous leaks throughout the system. The system only partially functions. You're really only looking at a full functionality on your, I think they said 1 through 6 holes. And sprinkler coverage, undersized piping network, lack of valves, and block-style design plague the system. I think some of this also has to do with the fact that you have a lease of such a long duration that, if you're also looking at today's standards, 20 years ago, perhaps that might be an acceptable substitute or something at that time, but at this point, essentially what they're saying is there's a lot of functional obsolescence. One thing they did say was that, they summarized it, and they said there's no part of this system that is worth saving. It would be better to focus on what is needed for proper irrigation of this golf course instead of wasting time trying to fix what is here. Again, a lot that goes along with that is the parts that are there, the system that is there, you're not going to find it. You're not going to be able to, obtain a lot of those parts. A lot of them have brass heads, which you can't really find anymore. The irrigation heads, or some of them are which, you might have in your yard or something to that effect, so they don't have proper coverage and things like that. So, again, some of that has to do with probably, at the time that it was installed, again, a long time ago, and then as you go along, you're sort of battling the times that change. Other inspections that we had done were the codes inspection. They looked at the clubhouse and maintenance sheds in particular. I will note the maintenance sheds were of concern. Structurally, the codes department, they indicated that they're not structurally sound, and so that's of concern. NPR, who is our insurance carrier, on site, and we also had Shannon with Risk Management out there with us. They expressed quite a few concerns with the condition of the structures and the items going around it. There's one of the maintenance sheds actually being held up by a tree stump, sort of with the nail or screw through it. So, there are some challenges out there, in regards to those maintenance sheds. But at the end of the day, that's where you store your equipment. So, if it's not maintained, or it's dirty or structurally sound or something to that effect, or they identified some areas where oil had leaked, the valve been left open on the fuel, and some things like that. But that's where you're supposed to house your equipment and take care of it. And so, when you have challenges with a facility like that, it just has a snowball effect. It's a little hard to take care of equipment when the facility in and of itself has its own challenges. We had Tim in the engineering, Tim McEldowney. He inspected the bridges. Again, he didn't get down underneath or anything like that, but there are some challenges on some bridges that he found. One of the bridges seems to be okay. The rest of them, seem to have challenges, and he kind of gave those ratings, which is in that packet I gave you. But one of the bridges had a tree fall on it. They were able to get it off. They have replaced, some boards on it, but the structure underneath is bent. The oil pump inspections, this really has nothing to do with the golf course operation. For the most part, there's nothing the current operator handles with that. However, while we were out there, we noticed several of them were leaking and oozing on the course, which does then pose challenges for trying to maintain a course. We did reach out to the Kansas Corporation Commission, and they did come out and inspect, and the group that operates those actually came out and got them working and has remediated pretty much those identifiable areas. In regards to operations, the information regarding operations is somewhat limited, and some of this has to do with the structure of the lease and what information is provided. In 2015, they did report a number of rounds was 5,085, which in turn resulted in $1,831 in lease payment for 2015. Revenue and rounds have continued to decline. I would argue that has to do a lot with course conditions, since those are typically paramount to a golf course success. The current operator did propose a buyout to the city. That is not in your packet, but I do have that. And I'm not sure to what extent that you would discuss that.
Discuss executive session.
Okay. This shows the golf course rounds over time, going back from November 2003 to what we have reported to at this point through 2015. Your revenue is going to follow the same thing, but you can see that it is declining. In summary, the course conditions and irrigation system are in need of major overhaul and replacement. Deferred maintenance and lack of investment are significant factors that are affecting playability and contribute to decline in the rounds. A lack of proper turf maintenance by qualified personnel and adequate course management programs are significant factors contributing to the decline in the course. Many trees need to be removed, and one thing USGA indicated to us is there would be a significant amount of trees that do need to be removed, but having them removed would actually, I wouldn't say significantly, but would noticeably improve the greens and the tees. There's a lot of shade, and removing those would help quite a bit. So, you have one hole, I believe it's number 7, the green, it's shaded all day. So when they water it, there's just no way for it to just kind of go through its water and, cycle and aerate and things like that. Plus, some of those valleys, air doesn't really get down there very well. The clubhouse and maintenance sheds are unsafe and are not structurally sound as recommended by codes that they be removed or replaced. I will note that in the lease it does say that when it does expire, that the clubhouse is to be removed by the operator, if that's how we decide to continue. Mineral rights are a challenge for the course in that the electrical lines impede playability and safety of golfers. This is a challenge out there in the fact that you have telephone poles that are in the middle of a fairway, and you have electrical lines that hang down quite a bit. And believe it or not, while everybody has a challenge getting that ball in the tiny cup, you'd be amazed how many times that little tiny ball actually hits a power line. And some of them are over greens, some hang over fairways, and they have some trees that are planted next to the telephone poles to kind of help mask that. But with that setup and with the oil pumps, what is needed is some sort of barrier hazard indication to golfers. And right now, those oil rigs do not have anything around them, and that, my understanding, is the responsibility of the people with mineral rights. However, at the same time, golf is about etiquette. It's about, course conditions, things like that. There's an actually term in the USGA rules of golf that call abnormal course conditions, and if those are there, then they, typically need to be marked. However, when you have a telephone pole in the middle of the fairway with a guide wire that maybe you necessarily can't see, that might pose a hazard if somebody's driving their cart or doing something else, or, frequently you might have your foot dangling out to the side or something to that effect while you're looking for your ball. So that does prove to be a challenge. Improving course conditions will take more than 1 or 2 seasons to improve and will require proper ongoing management, maintenance, and investment. You know, so what I'm saying is, like, if you said, hey, go fix that green today, that's going to be a little bit of a challenge until you get a little more into the season. The other thing is if you went out and sprayed, right now what makes the course look green is clover. So if you decided to go out and spray and say, I'm going to take care of that, you would be looking at a lot of brown instead of green. So some of those weeds are actually what's kind of providing that ground cover. Prolonged neglect leading up to the end of the current lease will cost more in the long run. And here at the end, basically, you know, up to this point, and I'm obviously up here presenting, so I'm sure you might have questions or anything else like that, but in a nutshell, the course simply needs to be adequately maintained. And I don't recommend a comprehensive master plan at this time. There was actually a master plan that was done in 2004. And so if we're wanting to do a master plan, we just simply probably need an update to that. The plan had a clubhouse, the plan had parking lot, the plan had you know, structures, it had the layout of the course, those type of things. So I don't see the redundancy in needing to do that. You're going to be restricted on how much you can change the course, given the mineral rights, number one, and number two, the layout of the course would pose challenges on adjusting those anyway. The other recommendation is to move forward with putting out an RFP to solicit new operator or management to determine the next steps and plan for the future. That includes market info, operations, maintenance, and infrastructure. And the reason that that's being recommended is contracting out the operation is going to be less costly to the city than doing it in-house. And when it comes to golf courses, your effective management, your good management, things like that is going to be more efficient. Private world is going to be more efficient in helping us do that. If this comes in-house, you're talking about probably a sizable budget, equivalent to municipal golf courses around here that are $1 million. Now, obviously, you charge fees and you recover that cost and you try to break even. But given the improvements that are needed, you would have to raise rates quite a bit in order to either cover that cost or you'd have to subsidize it of some sort. And then in the meantime, develop and work on a transition plan given on what decision direction we decide to go. But I think the important thing is that, before you, commit resources or, that right now the course doesn't have any budget, it'd be helpful, in my opinion, to go out to RFP, find out, who's interested, what investments would they be willing to make. Maybe they have better ideas. Yes, no part of this irrigation system that's worth saving. However, right now there's portions of it that still function. If they fail, we might, have to figure something else out. But, it might help to get, some other opinions, find out who is interested in perhaps, contributing and helping with the course. We wouldn't probably be up here talking about it if the community didn't feel like it added value. So, we have to consider ways to do that. I mean, I've managed municipal golf courses. I've done it successfully. At the same time, your ROI, your return on investment is probably going to be a little easier on the expense side if we try to get a partner in on this. Other than that pretty much concludes my presentation.
Okay. Questions for Scott regarding the presentation? Lee?
Yeah. So you said that you feel like the present decline is attributable to the course conditions, and you said by a lot. So if I had to push you into a corner and get a number, maybe a percentage, what percentage would you say it is? I mean, is it course conditions 10% of this equation? Is it 50? Is it 80? And we fix this course and then everybody comes back to it and it becomes a beacon for all of Johnson County for, golfer enthusiasts? Is that
Well, I could put it this way, let's say we decide to run it and I'm put in charge of it. If I don't have resources to improve the course, you could have, Hale Irwin, somebody else, any kind of, expert, and without the lack of improvement in the course is only going to be able to ride their name for so long. So, percentage-wise, I say you're at least 70% is course condition. But again, the trick is maintaining that condition and having, the knowledge and the capability and the resources to maintain that. Same time, you have 60-plus golf courses in Johnson County. So you have Prairie Highlands, which isn't very far away. So you sort of have to ask yourself, some questions like, do you want it to be like Augusta, or is average good enough? Do we need to be all out and out? Because if we decide to make it look like Augusta, nobody's going to want to pay those green fees. So we also have to kind of understand our market. And you get over 25, $30 on a green fee, then it's going to affect the performance of the course as well. So, to make some effective management decisions, you're going to need, some information on how to proceed with that.
Yeah, we'll specifically, we'll need to know how much can we charge and how much are we going to have to invest, and how long, and then how much will we have to invest continually in the subsidy, because this is going to be a subsidized
absolutely.
amenity. So
I would be in front of you every year probably asking for $150,000, $200,000 subsidy, at least in the beginning, at least the first 5 years.
So, I don't know if this probably isn't a question for you. It might be for code enforcement. But I'm curious, if the city sent inspectors out and they found unsafe conditions, what's the course of action going forward with the unsafe condition? How do we protect the public? And isn't it our responsibility to make sure that those codes are somehow enforced? So what do we do? What's the go forward plan with that?
Well, certainly the code is in place, and we are the people who have enforcement authority over the code. There is, in terms of just code enforcement, there is no legal liability under the Tort Claims Act for either the inspection of or failure to conduct an inspection, or failure to issue a code citation. That's within our discretion, so there's no legal liability there. That being said, we're in a bit of a different situation here because we are not only, exercising our police powers, we're also exercising our proprietary powers as the owner of the underlying fee title in the property that is situated on there. Now, that being said, we have entered into a long-term lease, and the lessee has the right of exclusive control and operation of the premises. But, if someone gets hurt, I guarantee you that the city, as the fee holder on that property, will be a named party. And so, we have more than just kind of enforcement authority that we need to consider in this perspective. So, my recommendation would be if we've got code violations, we know our life, health, safety violations, we should address that.
My last question for now. I might have others. I thought I read something in the agreement that said something about one potential or one contingency of this lease is that the course must be reasonably maintained.
Yes.
So, I guess this is for the Parks Director. Would you, in your opinion, say that the course has been reasonably maintained? I guess, and you have to probably put your 1980 glasses on to look at it. In terms of what would have been reasonable for 1980 when the agreement was signed, is it, and I guess going forward to today, is it what you would consider reasonably maintained?
I say by today's standards, no. My opinion is that it's not been reasonably maintained. I do know that we do have documentation where concerns were addressed to the operator by the previous director in 2014. However, not a lot of, changes or anything like that have occurred. But by standards of golf course, in my mind, this is why I got the USGA, and I also got an irrigation consultant involved, because we need to be objective about this. And, and when you're determining playability of a course and course conditions, we could argue like, oh, well, this is what it looks like. Well, if you have a dollar spot on your green, I mean, that's like a gateway drug to all other drugs, It's something that's easily fixable if you just deal with it right then, but if you don't, then it turns into a bunch of other stuff. And so you can't get down the path without a lot of deferred maintenance and issues. I have never personally witnessed moss fruiting on a golf course green before. And so, as a golfer, when you're coming and you're playing once and you're done. And then what you're doing is you're going to tell somebody else. And so, for the general public that maybe doesn't necessarily play or maybe understand all that, but from a golfer standpoint, it's a game of detail. So, again, a little crumb in the way it moves your ball, it's your fault it didn't go in the hole. But these are things where a reasonable person could go out and say, whoa, this is a problem. If you're looking at, a bridge where you're just like, I don't even know if I want to drive over that, that's a problem. There's signage issues, there's safety issues, the cart passer, and which you can deal with cart pass, in certain ways, but, somebody's cruising pretty good, they might tip over, so there's a lot of issues, and in my opinion, no, it has not been reasonably maintained. But again, that's why I thought it was important to get USGA and the other consultant involved. Because again, you asked me this last time, Councilman Shute, you said you play golf. I love golf. I play golf. I've managed golf. But at the end of the day, we have to be objective about where we're at, and we can't continue to solve problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. So, sort of have to take off that I do love golf kind of thing and figure out, okay, how are we going to solve this problem? And so, objectively, no, it hasn't.
Can I
Sure.
toss in real quick? Let's say, subjectively, could the operator of the course say, well, when we took the course over, there were sand greens, and now there's grass greens, and while they're not as good as the sand greens were, we've made improvements through the years. Would we end up with subjectivity problems if it was something that we wanted to hold the operator's feet to the fire, and they decided they'd rather litigate instead? Yeah, that's right. I'm looking at you, Ryan Jing.
So the lease doesn't have like any hard metrics in terms of what constitutes playable conditions, what doesn't. And so, Scott and I have had a lot of discourse about this, and really a risk-benefit analysis of what our legal options are in terms of if we want to declare a breach of the lease, and really what would we gain? I mean, and initially, he and I had one conversation, but then when we got this USGA study back, and with how bad of a picture it paints, the playing conditions out there. I mean, I think originally we were talking, well, wouldn't we want to step in and try to preserve what we can? But with the poor condition that's reported out there, not sure we gain a lot. And we would certainly probably draw a legal challenge from the owner if we tried to step in and intercede and declare breach on the lease. And what we're talking about is the lease termination date coming up in August of 2018. So we're talking about one more playing season and then halfway through, and so that kind of shifted Scott and I's discussion to, okay, because it's gonna take a while to get a game plan in place, get everything in place so that when August of 2018 rolls around, we're ready to roll with a succession plan and ready to take the action that we think is necessary to jump right in there in the fall, improve prime germination season, and start improving playing conditions at that point in time, rather than, intercede into a situation where there's probably very little to gain other than drawing a lawsuit.
Which was my concern.
Yeah.
Todd?
Quick question. You've managed golf courses before. What, you remember, like, on average rounds per year, for those courses? You ballparked it?
I can tell you at Joplin, we averaged about 24,000 rounds a year, and that's when the course was in pretty rough shape. With a clubhouse that has mold in the basement and everything else. So, those rounds shot up, and got the resources we needed, and actually my old staff communicated to me not too long ago that they're $90,000 over revenue budget simply by leasing 3 greens mowers and 1 rough mower and getting a golf pro and a golf superintendent, and that was it. With a big complaint there was the speed of the greens. Now, it's different at every course, but it had like a rating of a 5, which is slow, and we got it up to an 8. And then they were trying to steal the superintendent away and everywhere else to the private club and whatnot. So, up here, the rounds are a lot more. But given the nature of that course, you're not going to achieve that. So what we have to do is kind of find that critical mass where we don't over-improve to where we can't ever get our return on our investment, but then also we can't let it remain that way either. And again, a lot of this also has to do with the fact that regardless of how we proceed, the costs are going to be there. I mean, the water comes from the lake. The pipe is 2 inches smaller than it should be to draw from the lake. There's a leak right on the edge of the curb where that pipe comes through, and it's actually starting to erode away the road a little bit. So, those are some things that are now, kind of causing some other concerns. The White House that's there, that's scheduled to be demolished. That's in the budget. So, we'll be taking care of that part of it. But, if you decide, hey, we're going to do it in-house, you want to buy all this equipment, and your insurance carrier goes, I don't want employees inside that building, so now it just kind of has a snowball effect. So there's a lot of pieces that go with it. And, but, the rounds from, the past.
I think 16 was...
Yeah, I mean, back in, 09, they were up, 12,000. And I didn't chart it here, but typically, what I've charted in the past with community centers, golf courses and everything, I'll throw the actual Dow Jones Industrial Average on the chart, and you would be surprised how much they follow each other. So as the stock market's gone up, this has continued to decline, which then sort of tells me a little bit, anecdotal, but something's not right. So it's either course conditions or management or something else to that effect. It could be marketing, it could be a lot of other things, but I can't get that information to you because we do not operate the course.
And just to clarify, when you mentioned, coming before us for a subsidy, $150,000 to $200,000, that is that just for operating costs? That would not include any kind of initial investment, correct?
Correct. I mean, you're going to get a big jump in the beginning if you kick up a course. It's going to get busy, and it actually probably be look its greatest maybe the first 1 or 2 years, but then it's sustaining that over time is where it become a challenge. And so, you know, it's not something that's cheap, but if it's managed properly and you get it, you know, our goal at Joplin was to get rid of the subsidy. And so we had a $100,000 subsidy, which we eliminated in 1 year just kind of by changing the course conditions. Now the challenge becomes, how do we keep that going?
Anything else?
That's all for now.
Christie, you got anything?
I just have one question. So in reading through the report, and I'm not a golfer, so I don't know how much some of the stuff impacts one way or the other, but it was pretty overwhelming. And so I guess my question is, and you mentioned in here, you know, 1 to 2 years, or actually I think a couple of years to really lay the foundation to start improvement. Is that while people are golfing? I mean, I guess my question is there any downtime? So is there any benefit to saying, you know, we're not going to open this summer, or we're going to be closed half of the summer? Or can all of this be done realistically while the course is still active?
Well, I think it depends on the resources that are available, perhaps, you know, who's involved, how we're going to approach it. If you decided, oh, well, we want to put Zoysia down in all the entire course, I mean, that could be done in a decent amount of time. However, it's costly. So what you do is you maybe perhaps what's called strip sodding, which is just you kind of do it in rows that have gaps. But something like that takes about 2 years to establish. And so, you know, Zoysia will find its way, but Zoysia is also very durable. It can take a beating and those kind of things. But right now you have, you know, this whole mess, you know, fescue, bent grass, clover, you know, weed, you know, things like that. And so the hard part is at the end of the day, your irrigation is basically like the veins in your blood. And if I can't get nutrients to something, then it's very difficult to continue to, you know, invest in some of those things if there's no way to, you know, to help preserve it. You know, I mean, it's not going to be, what is that? What's that saying, like cheap, you know, fast, you know, I can't recall that, but, you know, pick two kind of thing. I mean, that's really the approach. So if the other option is that you work on 9 and leave 9 open, and then you open up that 9 and work on the other 9 the next year. If you let the greens go, it goes out of sight or whatever. If you have to rebuild a green, you're looking at probably $50,000 a green. They aren't USGA greens. They don't have the drainage. They're built-up greens, which is just like trying to grow one in your front yard. So, you know, it's a little tougher to manage those type. I mean, they went from sand to that, so they don't have the advantages of some of the other courses around. So it would take some time, but that's why, you know, even, you know, past fall I was bringing up, it's like we have to start figuring something out now, because if we just get to August 2018 and go, oh, we're ready to take it over, our hands are tied, you know, we're starting in August. So.
Just one more quick. So when you talk about an RFP for someone to come in, let's just say that's take over in August. What would that look? I mean, because I'm thinking with what you just said, who is going to want to take this over unless I say to the city for the first 3 years you're paying me $100,000 to come and invest. I mean, so what does that look like as even an option?
Well, basically, you know, you put out an RFP for management, you know, operation services, and what you would do is you kind of like, using the right term, triple net. Yeah. And so basically you're, what?
I don't know if that's what you're talking about or not.
I don't know either, but basically what you're doing is you're looking for a partner in on that and say, okay, this is what we have, and for example, I believe it's Shoal Creek, Kemper Sports Management runs that for the city of Kansas City. I know Blue Springs, they went out and got a management service, but what these management companies will do, you know, they'll operate it, but they're also going to determine your price point and some other things like that. But essentially what you're doing is saying, this is what we want. We want somebody to manage the course. We want you to assume, you know, the cost, the expense, things like that. You could even put in the whole capital thing, but nobody's going to do that on a 2-year thing. And that's kind of the hard part now, like, oh, well, can you put a bunch of resources into it? Well, what return on investment are you going to get with 1.5 years left on a lease? And so, right now, if you went out and solicited that, you're going to have to look at probably a 10-year type of deal. And then they're going to have to sort of assess their cost, but at the same time, they might, you're going to get somebody that's going to evaluate it and go, we can make this better, we can do that, and then basically, you're going to have to negotiate sort of, what kind of lease, even if you ended up paying them initially or something like that, $20,000, or 50 or whatever that may be, I'm still looking at that subsidy if you did it in-house, at least 6 full-time personnel, at least $800,000 worth of equipment. And then we're still trying to figure out what building are we going to put this in, and those type of things. So you're really trying to find a partner to help share those costs. And so when you go out for an RFP, you're just kind of leaving it open, saying, what do you think you do? What are you willing to invest? And then what are you asking of us in order to make that work? And if you got nobody, then we're probably looking at each other going, okay, what are we going to do? Because if the golf course industry isn't interested, then we might have some challenges. But I can tell you I have been contacted by 2 separate entities that are. So, that's a plus.
Well, and that's, how many other private partners do you think that we might be able to get to respond to an RFP for something like this?
Well, I think you'd probably at least get 2. The benefit of having the RFP is these entities already have market data. So, they're going to have this regional data. They're going to already have, this information of like, okay, where's my golfer at? How far are they out? How are we going to draw them in? What price point are we going to be at? They're going to have information we don't necessarily have right away without some sort of study or something, to that effect. But if you can end up getting paid versus, would you take an $1,800 lease payment over a $150,000 subsidy if the course, is adequately maintained? And I would answer every day yes. So really, it's probably going to take some flexibility, allowing whoever it may be to be able to reinvest back into the course to get it back to a good asset.
Todd's got another question, but Steve, did you want to?
Yeah, I was just going to make a quick inquiry, and that is, you've been in the golf course management business. You understand the market to a certain extent. You also understand that the golf courses have become increasingly commoditized over the last couple of decades. A lot of it has to do with the fact that people have a lot of choices in which they can play. They can choose to play a private course, they can choose to play public courses. We do have a course in Prairie Hollows literally right down the road, about 1.5 miles away. What I've read has told me that in order to break the commoditized offering, you have to have something that's a differentiator, something that sets your course apart from other courses. I don't.
Telephone pole.
Telephone poles in the line of sight.
Hit the pole, get it.
What? And just I'm asking you for your opinion. What differentiators do you potentially see with a course that's rehabilitated here?
Well, this is where I'll probably fall back on in the last presentation I had. At the end of the day, we know what golfers want. We don't necessarily know what the other 91% of the community wants. And so sometimes you can do this cluster, this cumulative attraction, put some things together. If you had a golf course, and I might get arrows in my back. I'm not saying this is happening, but if it were 9 holes, what could you do with the other 9? We're doing the retracement trail, the National Park Service. That trail's coming right by the golf course, right down that road. Mm-hmm. And then taking a nice sharp right over to Celebration and down Kill Creek. So we're setting this thing up for, possibly potential federal funds or, some things of that effect, but let's say it's 9 holes. Does that become, Frisbee golf, does it become a nature thing? Does it, something to that effect? Or
And
do you look at a golf course and say, what if I put miniature golf out front? What if I had a nice clubhouse for meeting space that had a restaurant in it, and then you just lease out the portion of that clubhouse, and somebody can run a restaurant out of there. Now you're incorporating, the business world in on
Well,
that.
And that kind of goes to what I was saying, that, you have to look at revenue streams to differentiate, and you also have to look at, what kind of additional uses can you get out of the same property.
Right.
And, I know that a lot of courses have gone to all sorts of crazy things like disc golf and stuff like that in order to be able to bring additional people on. And I'm not saying that we have to go to gimmicks, but what I'm saying is that if, we have to increase revenue, we have to get people from out of the community to come here to play. And, I think we could increase revenue by doing some things like what you just mentioned, which is the restaurant and some additional offerings on site, but it's going to be tough to draw those people from out of the community if we don't have a top-notch offering.
Right.
And top-notch offering is going to cost money, and then now you're going to be manipulating that price point, and you might be pricing the people that are regular golfers in this community right out of the picture. So you're right. There's a fine line here, and I don't know. It's a tough nut to crack.
Well, Top Golf's been the one to figure it out.
Yeah, but they're not a golf course.
They're not a golf course, but they've attracted the non-golfer, and that's where the challenges are. The PGA suffers from lack of women playing.
Yes.
It's a lifetime sport.
And minorities too.
Yep, and it's expensive to get started, and then it takes so long to play. So, after you've been playing 8 hours on a Saturday and you come home and my wife goes, I hate that sport, you've been gone all day. Little Tommy, you're never playing that. I'm not saying that happens in every house or anything. My wife never did that. She'd probably kill me when she sees this. But, she never said that.
Your wife doesn't want to watch
There's the
council
camera.
meetings.
She never said that. But, the only time I get nervous up here is when I mention, oh my God. But, we sort of have to look at that cluster and, how can we put some of those things together, and is there a way to do that? So I agree.
Yeah, and I know that there's sentiment to keep 18 holes, and I totally understand it. And if we can do it right, I'd have no problem with it. The question is, can we do it right and still have people afford to play it?
Right.
Everyone.
And let me get Todd, he was
Okay.
wanting to get back in, then we'll get Julie, and I've got a couple myself, so.
If, looking at the possibility of keeping it or putting it out for RFP or whatever, and knowing that the lease, it comes up in 2018, are there any smaller improvements we could make now that would pay off later? Spending $20,000 to put down seed or fertilizer or something like that, would that be worth the investment now?
I think probably
Or cutting some trees back?
cutting
or-
trees would be the one thing that, if you're wanting to contribute to something, that's something that you would consider, because like right now, is it 1, 2, 3, 4, hole 4? You're staring at a telephone pole in a tiny fairway like this, which then creates a blind shot, but it becomes a huge safety hazard. And so there's things like that. There's also signage and course direction and some things to that effect that are also safety issues. So from my standpoint, those are some things that I would consider. But, the trees, get some air in there and some things like that. But at the end of the day, if you're still watering it and you're doing, you're not treating the disease, well, the trees will help. But it's not so much acquiring the resource, it's the application.
Go ahead.
Been on this, because one of the things that I'm thinking, we've got an aggressive tree trimming program for our electric utility. It's a pretty big contract, I would imagine, for the tree trimming company. I would hope that if we were to RFP it, they'd give us some preferential treatment as far as getting some of that tree trimming accomplished. So I think that's number one. I think there's some cost-effective ways of getting some of the tree issues solved. And while we're on the electric issue, are those Gardner Energy, or Gardner Utility, Gardner Electric lines that are going over the golf course? Is that a Gardner Electric, power pole?
Yeah, those,
And is that something that we can bury, because we're perfectly capable of doing that, aren't we, Gons? So, I mean, but do you know if that's... Oh, that's KCP&L? Well,
we got one
we'd
laying
have
in.
to see whether or not they'd be willing to work with us on that. Larry, I see you grabbing.
There's two sets of lines out there, sir, on the codes enforcement people when they went out and looked at them. Part of them are fed by KCP&L, but then the the people that have the mineral rights actually run private lines directly to the wellheads, and the ones that run across the golf course themselves are actually private lines, and so they would have to be handled by and they're what we call two-wire lines, which means there's not a true neutral to them, so they're very dangerous to work with, and so they would need to take care of that on a private basis, just for safety's sake and liability's sake, because it's their lines.
Well, it sounded good when I was formulating it in my head.
Well, and you're also trenching across the fairway, we'd have little things to dodge too.
Okay,
But yes, ultimately, that.
Lee, you wanted back in?
Yeah, I'm curious about, how an RFP would go. I mean, do we need to have, a consensus of our potential investment before we go out with an RFP, or is it, we're just gonna go and say, hey, what are you willing to invest? And they come back with, we'll give you $100,000 worth of improvements, and then we'll look at it and say, oh, we gotta come up with another $2.1 million to bring this to, any kind of playable condition and safe condition. Is that how that works, or is that what
Yeah,
we're really looking at? Or do we need to come up with, a figure?
I wouldn't start with a figure, unless, we've figured out a funding source and where to budget it at, because we already know the irrigation's gonna be over $1 million, I mean, if you redid the whole thing. But I kinda treat it, we're kind of the family practitioner, and we kinda need a specialist or a surgeon to come in and say, okay, well, wait a minute, and, this is kinda what we're looking at, and help provide us, sort of that guidance, and they come back and say, hey, we need, $500,000 to be able to do this and get this going, and we'll do a 10-year deal, with maybe some reinvestment over time. Because what they're gonna present is gonna also depend on their own situation too. So if you get someone like Kemper Sports Management or somebody like that, they have money to invest, but they may not be interested. So, there may be, they're a national company that does all kinds of high-level golf courses, but, Orion Management, that's one that's around here, there's, a couple others, so, there's some avenues to go. So you might get some players that...
Just based on the report, and I looked at it quite extensively, the playability is one thing, and it seems like that's a significant investment right there, just to get playability, just to get the course up to par, forgive the pun. But the other thing is, significant structural investment. I mean, we need to build things out there, buildings, we need a place to put carts, you need a place to maintain carts, you need a pro shop. We don't own any of that, save for the old house that's there and maybe a couple of...
That's being torn down, yeah.
It's been torn down. Yeah.
So I'm looking at, just rough figures. I'm thinking, somewhere in the neighborhood of $3 million to get us a golf course. Right now, we have something that loosely resembles a golf course.
Right. Now, I will say that either on the extension or the end of the lease, it does become yours.
Right.
So, with the exception of the clubhouse.
Yeah. And that 1.1 to 1.3 for the irrigation system is probably, that's cost, pardon the pun, it's sunk I mean, it's sunk cost. I mean, it's gonna have to happen if we decide that we're going to maintain 18 holes. That's a course, that's a cost we're gonna have to eat. And so now we're talking about all the additional stuff. We're gonna have to have at least one club pro out there, you know, that can manage the facility
Absolutely.
in a proper way. At least one head groundskeeper out there to do the course maintenance. Probably one or two course staff, you know. And if that, whether that's from us or whether that's from the management company, it's gonna have to be picked up by somebody. So,
Probably more like 3 or 4, but that's,
yeah, well, that's a minimum,
yeah,
yeah.
you, but,
So,
greenskeeper, 4 full-time course staff, I would imagine anyway, if not more.
yeah.
So, okay, I got a couple of quick things to consider. I mean, number one, you know, we've got some youth in the area that have performed very well in the state tournaments. Matter of fact, I want to say the runner-up last year was a female golfer from Gardner Edgerton, and so, you know, if we could figure out a way to spur enthusiasm for youth golf, inside your department, working with the school district, maybe that's certainly one way to go. You know, the other thing that I think about, I've been to Topgolf a couple of times. The price point is actually, you know, once you buy a plate of nachos and a couple of, we'll just call them pops, you know, you're spending quite a bit of money. But I kind of wonder if there's not some kind of one-level driving range Topgolf type solution where you can maybe get a plate of nachos at a reasonable price and a
Pitch and putt?
couple of, domestic pops that isn't going to cost everybody an arm and a leg. Pitch and putt, you know, whatever. But something that would work. Specials for running, you know, when the daylight starts to go, you know, 9-hole specials, things like that. So people that would normally come home in the summertime and try and squeeze in 18 can still come home and squeeze in 9. And, you know, Lee mentioned, you know, a structure for carts, and, you know, personally, as a caddy long ago, I think you just build a structure out there for a bunch of young people and get some pull carts and some caddies out there, but that's just me. I can say, you know, we've got an awful lot of things in our community that other communities don't have. You know, they don't have airports, and they don't have golf courses, and they don't have lake access, and you know, this is one of those times where we've got it a little bit better than maybe some of the other communities, and I don't want to see that go away. Now, not afraid to look outside the box. 9-hole courses, par 3 courses, fancier driving range that is more family friendly, whatever. But you know, whatever the next step is, you know, given your success at Joplin, even in the short term, let's see if we can't structure this in a way that provides some value to the people in the community, especially the golfers, and maybe gets the next generation of golfers interested and excited. That's the other thing. You get caddies, they play on Monday, so that's just the way it was 40 years ago.
Thank you for the report, it's very
Yes,
good.
yes,
Yeah, those
very
are-
thorough, appreciate it.
Thank you.
We appreciate all the
Question?
time and effort. And any other questions?
So next step then is,
Oh, yeah.
what is the next step?
Well, I think that I think Scott's heard some things from us. You know, you've got a committee that you can talk about what you heard about from the council, and then maybe you can start thinking about how you want to structure your RFP, and maybe you can identify some people that you try and get to bid on it.
Well, I had one real quick comment about the neglect aspect, because we know that it's approaching the end of the lease. And we can pretty much assume that the leaseholder is not going to put a large investment into the course in the next year and a half. So what can we do within our power at all to help to arrest that decline, other than removing trees? Because the trees won't arrest the decline. It'll make the course more playable from the standpoint of sight lines, but it will not fix the issues with the greens or with the fairways or the tee boxes. And the greens, you spoke about the greens, if they're not playable anymore, and now you talk about building up a new green, that's $50,000 a pop. I really would like to keep our greens, just like with the roads, I'd like to keep some of the good roads good, and there's probably some good parts to the greens out there. I'd like to be able to keep those without having them fall further into disrepair in the next year and a half.
Yeah, because they'll just shrink. That's usually what you do when you struggle with maintaining it, they get smaller.
Yep.
The one thing I would probably say to that is you could potentially contract out the maintenance side of it and let them operate the course till the lease is up. It'd be more cost efficient because we don't have the equipment.
Would they have to agree to that?
That was my
Yes.
next question.
Yeah.
They would have to agree to that?
If we're improving course conditions,
Well,
they're
yeah, I
probably
can
gonna.
imagine that they wouldn't, but.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at. What can we do now, relatively inexpensively to prevent
Yeah.
major, issues down the line?
You're really limited. I think, with the lease and kind of how it's set up, we're not quite sure.
I mean, short of us
You-
declaring a default, then whatever we do with the current operator has to be by agreement. And so,
Yeah.
Scott and I have had this discussion.
Yeah. I know.
What are legal options to try to, because you're right, what's their incentive to continue to spend money?
None.
And so we've discussed what our legal options are and then what our other options are. So we'll continue to have that discussion and understand that's a priority.
I guess I would also ask how much worse could it possibly get?
Right.
I mean,
It could get
And there's not a real benefit from
Well-
the city's standpoint to bring it in, considering the payments we're getting from the golf course, and they do seem to want to be rid of it, if I understand correctly.
There is a golf course called Burning Tree up in DeSoto that had so much overgrowth over a few years, they burned it. That's why it got its name,
burning tree.
in order to get it to a point where they could actually turn it back to a course.
and we're not at that
That's
point.
being run by a third party, right?
Correct.
We're not yet at that point, is that what you're saying?
No, we're not. We got so many trees out there, I don't know if anybody be prepared
And
for
there's
that.
oil.
Right,
And there's oil.
Yeah.
And a
Make
telephone
it
pole.
look,
Yeah,
make it look like you're
might be
rocking.
a bad-
Yeah. Let's stop calling them mineral deposits and start calling them oil.
No.
Yeah. Fire and oil don't mix
But-
very well.
Yeah.
I do have an RFP pretty close to being done. It might be something we can discuss at committee,
Great.
Okay.
so.
Excellent.
Discuss with the committee, discuss with the city administrator, I mean, if it needs to come back to, if you think it needs to come back to council, just to get a little, we can do that.
Okay.
All right, anything else?
Thanks, Scott.
Anyone? Scott, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for excellent work. All right, next item on the agenda is public comments. Members of the public are welcome to use this time to make comments about city matters or items on the agenda that are not part of a public hearing. We got some further instructions, real quick. First, Scott suggested that he might get arrows in his back for suggesting some of the things that are up here. And at the last council meeting, we had a little dust-up. So I'm going to give a couple of very specific instructions. I'm going to ask that nobody engage in any profanity or any personal attacks on Scott or anyone else. With that being said, I invite you to approach the podium, state your name and address for the record, and be heard.
Did you just
I guess, maybe. With that,
Disqualify
with no one coming forward, I'm gonna move on to the consent agenda. Is there a council member that would like to remove an item from the consent agenda?
I would like to remove, item 1.
Item 1, is there another item that would like to be, someone would like to have removed? All right, I would entertain a motion to approve consent agenda items number 2 through 6.
So moved.
Second.
Motion, Shute, second, Winters, that we approve consent agenda items 2 through 6. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstention? Items 2 through 6 pass. Consent agenda item 1, standing approval of the minutes as written for the meeting on January 3rd, 2017. Lee, you pulled this off, and I believe we've got about 6 pages of minutes. So if there's any issues that you've got, just if you can
Yeah.
direct us to the right spot.
Basically, normally I go through the minutes, I see a fairly, fairly representative accounting of what's happened in the meeting. This time around, it felt like there were some significant details withheld, that did, or not, maybe not on purpose or whatever. And I realize, we have an interim city clerk at this time, and maybe there's, a little bit of turmoil going on there, or misunderstanding. So I don't mean to say that it was done on purpose or whatever. I just wanted to, so I have a basic request to just go back through it, and there are a lot of things missing. From, if you look at the video and read the minutes that were published, so that, I don't know.
Well, by all means, let's go ahead and run through what you'd like to see.
Well, I don't have a copy in front of me because we didn't have enough copies for everybody, but,
Is it the italicized?
yeah, the italicized print here is, is basically the, what I see is wrong. You can just,
It looked like we had a big stack of those when it went past me.
There's a couple over there.
We have a copy back here. Is there somebody missing a copy of this that you handed out?
I am, but I have it on my phone, I just can't read what, any changes that he had.
yeah, the changes are in italics.
Well, let's,
So you can basically read, let's see, there's things missing, like Councilmember Melton confirmed that it was the September meeting that the council members had consensus for a work session. That didn't appear
where's,
in the meetings. It didn't appear in the minutes,
Three.
but it's on the second page, top of the second page. Very first
Okay.
italic print. And then you had me saying that I reiterated that I wanted to stick to the plan of having a work session, yada, yada. That's the second item. Then the mayor mentioned that he wanted experts to get their opinion, and that's not in there. And like I said, I don't expect that everything is going to be word for word in the minutes. I never have, but this is one where I thought there was some significant detail missing.
okay, well, listen, can we make sure that everybody gets a copy of this and with the suggested changes and, maybe we can, put off the approval of the minutes until the next meeting. I mean,
That's what I
'cause
was,
I would
That's what I would
be agreeing
suggest.
with that, absolutely. Basically keep this and table it for the next meeting, and then let the clerk, or the interim clerk, make the modifications, and then we would bring it up for consent agenda next meeting.
sure. So I'd entertain a motion to table consent agenda item number 1.
So moved.
Second.
Motion Shute, second Moore, that we table consent agenda item number 1. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstention? Consent agenda item 1 is tabled until the next council meeting. Next item on the agenda is, consider acceptance of the dedication of right-of-way and easements for final plat FP 1605 Willow Chase Subdivision 4. Larry Powell, good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Basically, what we have is, we have a new subdivision right-of-way, or excuse me, a new subdivision, Willow Chase 4, that is before you as a recommendation of the Planning Commission. This parcel is a part of the city. It has an address of 18220 Moonlight Road, and the southern portion of the entire property was rezoned from COA zoning in 2003 in case number Z-0304. And the southern L-shaped portion of the parcel consisted of 6.74 acres and was rezoned again early in 2016 in case number Z-1601 from COA to R2. This is the proper zoning for this subdivision for the building of homes. The preliminary plat for the entire parcel via case number PP-16-01 was approved by the city on 9/27/2016, and this final plat application is for the northern portion of that area, which was approved via the preliminary plat PP-1601. If we were to go on down through that, basically we just have the recommendation for that property, which consists of 3.41 acres and is made up of 9 lots and 1 tract of duplex residential development, and it will be located at the northwest corner of the intersection of South Moonlight Road and East White Drive, and based on a review of the staff report dated on 12/20/2016, recommends the governing body accept the easements and dedication with the following conditions. The excise tax of, and there should be a correction, $24,717 even, shall be paid to the city of Gardner prior to the recording of the final plat. 2, the applicant developer shall construct and maintain a 35-foot deep temporary turnaround at the front end of proposed lot 59 until further platting is completed south of the subject final plat application area. And 3, construction plans for utilities, infrastructure, and public facilities shall be submitted to the city for review and approval prior to obtaining city signatures on the final plat. So this is only phase 1 of what could be up to 3 phases of building of duplex or twin homes, as we call them now, on this property. So staff would recommend the approval of that at this point in time.
Public comments regarding new business item number 1. No one coming forward. Questions for Larry regarding the item?
I had one real quick question, Larry, and that was regarding the school district. Were they consulted, or did they weigh in at all on this development regarding potential for additional students at Moonlight Elementary?
They were given formal notification of the public hearing, and no one appeared from the school district at the Planning Commission meeting, either for or against or with any recommendation.
Okay, thank you.
I'm curious if there was any traffic study done yet for the increased traffic on Moonlight this is going to cause?
At this point, no, sir, because this property at this end was part of it that had always been R2. The southern end was the part of the property that had been changed, so it had originally been taken into consideration to be that district in the original preliminary plat for all of Willow Springs, so there was not a traffic study required.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, if not, I would entertain a motion for new business item number 1.
So moved.
Second.
Motion Moore, second Harrison, that we approve a request from Willow Chase 4, FP 1605, for a 3.41 acre, 9-lot, 1-track duplex residential development located at the southwest corner of the intersection of South Moonlight Road and East White Drive, based on review of staff, report dated 12/20/2016, with the following, with the previously noted exceptions. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? New business item number 1 passes. New business item number 2, consider approving a letter of intent for funding the Gardner Lake Spillway Repair and Dredging Project. Michael Kramer, good evening.
Evening, Mayor and Council. Back in, previously this year and actually last year now, in May of 2016, the state opened up applications for this type of project for dredging of lakes, for restoring water supply and water quality, and that's through the Department of Conservation and the Department of Agriculture. And at that time, we submitted a letter of interest saying we had a project. We thought it would be a good project for their program to look at dredging the lake. We had a 2004 sediment survey done. So back in 2004, it was recognized that the lake had sedimentation that needed removed. And so at that time, we put in a letter of interest. Members of the Lake Association Board and our staff, Brian Faust, former Public Works Director, met with Hakeem Saadi in the Department of Conservation. And so at that time, the plan was to move forward, and you know, typically with the state projects, you can kind of pool your monies from multiple years to come up with a single project and move forward with a larger amount of funds. And this October, we met again with Hakeem, and he said they wanted us to move forward with the project now. So in other words, they had the funds on their books, and they wanted to spend them or get them committed as soon as possible. And so what you have before you is an application that was done. It's the next step in the process of obtaining funds through the program. And the first part of the project is actually dredging the lake, removing silt from the lake. And the state has committed $280,000 towards our project. That's the funds they have available. And of course, we're working through the application process with them, and this is the next step in that. And of that 280, that's committed for 2017, and so we anticipate an agreement coming pretty quickly that includes that funding level. There's another $200,000 that we're hopeful to receive in 2018 state funds that would then be added to the project. And all of the monies from the state have to go directly to the dredging operations, which, you know, from our standpoint as a city and staff is good because it has multiple benefits and water quality and usefulness and nuisance reduction in plants and that sort of thing. So basically, with the monies from the state, we will dredge as much as possible, up to 200,000 cubic yards. And so it really depends on the site that we find for the material and the bid prices, and whether or not, you know, how much dredging we'll actually be able to do. The second part of the project is the spillway repair, and both in 2010, 2013, 2015, you know, all of the safety inspection reports have said we need to improve our spillway. And so the second part of the project is has been included in previous CIPs, and it's improving the spillway. And the cost on that is about $300,000, and that again is a CIP approved project. So essentially, the project, that's our matching funds, is repairing, our spillway and bringing it up to standards, and the state funds are doing the dredging portion of the project. So we've submitted the letter of intent now. Originally it was the letter of interest, now it's the letter of intent. And the state has just asked that, before they go and prepare the agreement and those sorts of things to bring back in front of you, just to get the city council's approval on the application itself, and, that you understand that this is leading towards an agreement to do the work and to receive the funding. And so that's the way the motion's written, asking that you support the submission of the letter of intent for state cost share assistance for water supply and restoration, the Gardner Lake Spillway Repair and Dredging Project to the Kansas Department of Agriculture with the intent of entering into an agreement for funding. Tonight, too, there's Harold Quaintance, the former Lake Association board member, is here. He provided the little information I gave you in a narrative of support, and then also some history on the lake itself. Mm-hmm. And then Larry Tamartu, the president-elect, is here as well, and possibly some other board members.
All right, well, we're going to open the floor for public comments, and if they would like to come forward. Same rules apply. Harold, you got to be careful with you. I mean, historically.
Well, I hope I can behave myself.
Name and address for the record.
Okay, I'm Harold Quaintance. I live at 15735 Lake Road 5. I applaud you at the city for your help on the dam tree removal. That was very important. When the Saucom Hardy was here, well, it was Harcum Side. I think I got it backwards. Anyway, he's the man that has the purse strings in Topeka on these projects. He complained a lot about the trees and brush on the dam as to making it leak at some point, which would be a major problem. He also said that we could put in for dredging until we were blue in the face, but until we had a plan, it wasn't going to happen. Looks like to me you folks are working on a plan, and we really appreciate that. There's going to be at least 40 homes that will get their lake back, but on the other hand, the whole lake will get sizable improvement from a dredging project. I have an idea that there may be a time in the future when water may be a scarce commodity. If we can improve the size of our vessel so we can use it as an emergency situation, I think it might be well worthwhile. And this can't be done overnight. It has to be done and then filled, and then you have the water itself. I guess I should ask if there's any questions on the research that I've done for the lake. I might be able to answer it, I might not.
I think I'm not getting any indications, but
Okay.
It's good research.
yes.
But
Well,
anyway.
we appreciate the information that you provided.
Okay. I think this is very important, I guess that's the reason I did all this background checking for, these years. I really appreciate your help. And if I can do anything in the future to help you with this, I'll be more than tickled to do so. Thank you much.
Thanks, Carl.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good evening. Larry DiMardo, 15510 Lake Road 10. President-elect, and no, I'm not Donald Trump. I've lived on the lake about 7 years, and with the sewers coming in, we're seeing vast improvement on the water, cleanliness on the water, which is exciting for us. Plus, if you've ever been on septic, it is horrible. Horrible. We're excited about this. This comes up at every lake meeting, every residence lake meeting we have. Everybody talks about it. The spillway, we've had emergency vehicles come around that side of the lake, go across the dam, not knowing that the spillway's closed, having to go all the way back around to get around to the lake on taking Gardner Road. So this would be wonderful to get that fixed. Plus, I think the water, you know, when we get large rains, it's because of the weeds, and we've tried to take care of that as a lake association, somewhat pulling some of the weeds and cleaning it up. I've had many volunteers go down there and try to do some work down there. But I think with the weeds, it holds our water back. So these last major rains we had, it was horrible. The lake rose dramatically. And, you know, there's some homes that are pretty close to the lake that were built in the 50s and 60s. And as that water rises, because the spillway is so junked up, I mean, we pulled logs out of it. It's horrible. I'm sure the Park and Recs people probably know that. They've been down there. I know you guys worked on the dam. But this, to me, is very important, and to a lot of the lake association residents on the lake. And, you know, the dredging part of it, every time they build a new home around Gardner Lake, all that, until they get it grass planted, all that dumps right into the lake. And it's amazing, just the 7 years I've lived out on the lake, how much my boat gets stuck. And anybody ever want to come out and take a boat ride, I'll be willing. Call me. I'll give you guys a ride out on the lake. But there's areas that I used to be able to get into that I can't get into anymore. So that's all I got to say. But y'all need my contact information, want to talk to me, I'm always open. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Other public comment? Don't worry, ma'am, we're going to get to you.
Hi, good evening, Mayor and fellow councilmen. Lou Levin, 15620 Lake Road 8. I just want to echo the sentiments expressed by the two previous speakers. From what I heard tonight, you have a really excellent opportunity with the state funding on the dredging and the commitment to move forward with the spillway repair. And there's a number of Gardner Lake residents in the audience tonight, and I think they're all very supportive of this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Lou.
There are a bunch of us. Karen Barber, I'm at 29345 West, 152nd Terrace. I just want to thank all of you for this being on the agenda. I've been at the lake over 20 years myself. A man-made body of water is a man-made body of water. It goes away unless you take care of it. This lake was 60 feet deep at one point. The deepest point we can find anywhere in the last 2 years is about 38 feet. If you've been to the south end of the lake, it is not a lake in the summer, it is a swamp. There is an area of the lake that you could pass over the little bridge on Gardner East Road. that you used to be able to take a boat to. We call that now the Gardner Glades. It's good for nothing but cattails and beaver dams and those kinds of things. So I just want to say that there are a lot of people that are very, very appreciative that this is on the agenda. I am so thankful, and that's all I want to say. We appreciate your help very much. Thank you. And my thanks to Harold for being just the greatest president that Gardner Association could have had. He's gotten so much done for us, and he's very much appreciated.
Very good. Thank you, Karen. Anyone else?
My name's David Penny. I'm from Lawrence, Kansas, 643 Tennessee. I was on the city commission there at one time, and we had some of these lake problems with Clinton Lake. And it was a new lake in the backwaters, but we did the study for Gardner back in 2004, the sedimentary study that was done. And Harold wanted me to come tonight. He's a very persistent fellow. And just give you a short detail of the thing. We'd worked for the state on other projects and also on private association lakes like Lake of the Forest in Kansas City, Dabanawa north of Lawrence. And we're actually, besides being engineers, I have a degree from MIT. We have several highly qualified people with us. And we do this, we don't make any money off the surveys, and we've done this for several cities around. But in this study that we did for you guys, you have a very nice lake, frankly. It's a beautiful lake, and but it's older, and lakes always sediment, fill in from the back end, and on this case, it's on the south end. And even back, 2004, that's 13 years ago, it was in pretty bad condition, that end of the lake. The end near the dam is in fairly good condition. The spillway, of course, you have that. That's an additional problem. But I would say that with the state coming in on this, it's going to be well worth your effort to maintain the lake. All these lakes are sedimenting, or silting in. Every lake that's built is a sediment collector. We don't have natural lakes, for instance, in Kansas and in most of the United States. So you have to maintain these things. The biggest issue that we've faced in these projects, engineering them and everything, is where you go with the sediment. And when we looked at it before, that was an issue of where to go. There's a rock quarry down there that could take the material. There was a fellow that had land there, a K-Stater, and he was willing at that time to really look at it and put it there. He's farming it, and it's right nearby, which makes distance is very important in dredging. But you may have some other options for cleaning it. At that time, we calculated it had about 90,000 cubic yards. And when you put it in a collection reservoir and you let the water come back, it will compress down about 2 to 1. Like we did at Lake of the Forest, we actually, they only had a reservoir of about 80,000. We pumped 130,000 cubic yards there out of the lake. And we pulled the water out and it compacted it down. We kept doing that until we got that 130,000 cubic yards in there. But I think you have a great project in this, and if you can get the state help, we could probably help you. I don't know, it's a little bit below our radar right now of dredging ourselves, and you may have to look at some other options because the funding at $280,000 and even additional $200,000, you're only looking at about $5 a yard, and it'll cost you probably a little bit more than that because you have mobilization, demobilization, and things like that. But we can talk with your staff here if necessary, I guess, Michael, and kind of give you some guidance if we didn't do it. You may be wanting to do it even mechanically around the edges with where you take hose out and load it into haul trucks and carry it away. It's a little bit messy, but it's messier than dredging, but it may be cheaper And you've got to look at the economy of the thing, and you want to maximize what you do, because this is the area that if you can even dig it out deeper than original, if you can go down with the soils with a big old hoe and dig that out, even if it's just around the edges, the other stuff will flow in there, but then you have a collection basin for the silt that's coming in. It doesn't go into the main body of the lake that way. Some people think they want to build a collection dam back, but in high waters, it just runs right through those. They don't have the ability to condense the stuff out, to precipitate it out. And so you need, if you do the back part of the lake, and just plan on doing it every 15 years or so, then you can do it cheaply, a lot cheaper, and you have a collection basin. You just keep it from migrating into your lake. It'll also open up the place for these 40 people or whoever lives on the upper end. But also, I think you want to keep it as a secondary source for water. We had that problem over there, and we ended up buying all the reserves out of even Perry, as well as Clinton Lake, just so we were assured that we had a water assurance project down there, because they'll silt in. I mean, it'll all turn eventually to pasture. But the deep part of your lake is still, in our opinion, and most of the coves are very good. It's just the south two coves, one to the east and then one on to the straight south. Mm-hmm. And I think you need to go in there. And you got some big trees in there, too, which also a hoe handles better than a dredge does. Mm-hmm. And everything. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. Anyone else? No one coming forward. Questions for Michael or any lake residents or David Penny regarding new business item number 2?
I'm just curious if the cost here includes any environmental impact studies or anything like that, or are there any NPDES
There are multiple permits that are required. As far as the dredging itself, so the way the funding's set up is, that's going directly towards the dredging operations. So any permits that a contractor would be required to get can be included with that. But if it's a permit that we just need to get to do the project, then that's going to be our cost. And the engineering and the design on it, that's going to be our cost as well. A couple things that were mentioned, the dredge material locations. Brian had previously looked at some sites further away and further south, and the costs were higher, and so we have reached out very preliminarily and talked with APAC. Harold has some other contacts in some other locations nearby that he's shared with me now, and so the actual site for the material is something that will be determined through the design process. And so I didn't want you to think that the potentials on here are the only ones that we'll be looking at. Okay.
Maybe we can use some of it for the golf course.
I was going to ask, seriously, are there any beneficial applications for this?
I don't know that there necessarily is.
Okay.
It's
Build some hills?
silty.
Ski hill.
Yeah, sledding anyway. Christie, did you?
I just have a quick question. So it looks like we're going to do the RFQ and then the design in 2017. Do we know, design-wise, what that costs? What portion of the $780,000?
In the CIP, it's a portion of that $300,000, and I don't have that in front of me. If I remember right, it's maybe $50,000 or so.
Okay, so $50,000 we would potentially spend in 2017. The rest would be budgeted for 2018. My question is, at what point? So we talked about, once we get into there, really understanding how much could be done and so forth. So at what point would we have that information? So if we wanted to, if we send this out and we find out that, listen, we will dredge half of the lake for this cost, but if you, since we're already gonna have our equipment and everything out there, we'll charge you kind of a better price for the rest of it. I guess I'm just trying to figure out do we have opportunity to get ahead of that and budget more in 2018 rather than limit ourselves at this point in time?
Two things. One is, through the process, I believe that we would know the state's budget and the availability of their additional funding before we're ready to go out for bid.
Okay.
So that's my hope, is that we know that number before we go out to bid. Now, if we're talking about the city looking at maybe potentially, throwing in extra cash towards the dredging or extra funds towards the dredging, then, I think as we narrow down our site and find out how close that'll be, the consultants that we're working with can hopefully then narrow down and get a better engineer's estimate. Originally, and a little bit of it's off the top of my head here, but originally I think Brian's cost on dredging was closer to $8 to $10 a cubic yard. Mr. Sadi with the state was talking 3 to 5, and so I'm going, we'll do as much as we can with the money we have.
And I would just, my point is, there's a certain amount of fixed cost with that, right, that a contractor's gonna have, and if we, I would just hate to see us limit ourselves and lose out on a potential.
And I think it's something as we move forward that if we see that an opportunity there, that we'll definitely bring it back and discuss that with council.
Okay, great, thank you.
Steve?
Yeah, I was just gonna kind of dovetail on what Christina was saying, is understanding we have limited budget, limited funds, and we want to be able to get the best bang for our buck. I think David, one of the speakers, talked about doing some backhoe work on some of those coves in order to be able to get some of that stuff, get that stuff removed from those shallow spots, and then working towards the middle of the body where the deepest sediment accumulation has taken place. I think we could probably get rid of 80% of the problem just in those coves. But what is the is that what the plan is? Are we going to start with the coves?
The plan is to start with the coves at the south end, and my anticipation is that even with the additional funding, that's probably all the further we'll get is the south coves and maybe the north or eastern cove there.
But the center of the lake will be. We won't get to that.
No, I don't anticipate getting to that. And
I don't think anybody's stalling their boat on the 38, but that level. No, correct.
But it would be something we would want to address in the future.
In the future, absolutely.
Part of a CIE, maybe?
Oh, absolutely, and especially considering we are involved with primary water sources, the Hillsdale Area Water Cooperative, but we're not the only jurisdiction that's tapped into that, although we are supposed to have a dedicated amount of flow from there. But as the city continues to grow,
that's kind of my thinking.
It needs to be protected out there. So.
And the deeper the lake, the better the water quality is going to be. So.
Sure.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Questions, comments? Could entertain a motion for the submission of a letter of intent.
So moved.
Second.
Motion second Winters that the city council sends a submits a letter of intent for state cost share assistance for water supply and restoration of the Gardner Lake spillway, repair and dredging project to the Kansas Department of Agriculture, Division of Conservation, with the intent of entering into an agreement with the state of Kansas for the project. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstention? New business item number 2 passes. Fair enough. Fair enough, Larry. New business item number 3, consider authorizing the city administrator to negotiate and execute a agreement for bond counsel services with Kutag Rock LLP for the period of January 17, 2017 through December 31st, 2017, with 2 additional 1-year options which renew annually unless terminated by either party. Laura Gorley, good evening.
Good evening. So we follow a lot of GFOA best practices, and GFOA's best practice for selecting bond counsel states, GFOA recommends that issuers select bond counsel on the basis of merit, using a competitive process, and review those relationships periodically, which was not defined. So, when bond counsel Riley retired, that translated to let's review periodically. So we sent out an RFQ to 4 firms, 3 of which responded. And it was also posted on the city website and in the Garden News per our purchasing policy. And also per our policy, a cross-departmental evaluation team reviewed the responses and interviewed all 3 respondents. And with all of those steps being taken, staff recommends that we continue with Kutag Rock, as stated here, annually renewing unless terminated by either party for all of this year, the rest of this year, and 2 more years.
Okay.
And bond counsel Serrano and Ellsworth are here in case you have any questions of them.
Okay, very good. Public comments regarding new business item number 3. No one coming forward. Questions for Laura regarding the new business item number 3 or for our friends at Kutag Rock? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Motion Harrison, second Shute. We authorize the city administrator to negotiate and execute an agreement for bond counsel services with Kutag Rock LLP for the period January 17, 2017 through December 31st, 2017, with additional 1-year options which renew annually unless terminated by either party. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? We'll be seeing you later this year. I am absolutely sure of it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. New business item number 4. Consider approving the appointment of Michael Kramer as Public Works Director. Cheryl.
Mayor and Council, we placed an advertisement for the Public Works Director position. We received 19 applicants. We interviewed 6 that were shortlisted, and we found a wonderful internal candidate that is before you tonight for recommendation, Michael Kramer. His resume is attached in the council backup. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay. Public comments regarding new business item number 4. No one coming forward. Questions regarding new business item number 4? That being the case, I would entertain a motion for new business item number 4.
So moved.
Second.
Motion Moore, second Harrison, that we appoint Michael Kramer, Public Works Director. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? Let's take the interim off that title. Congratulations.
Congratulations, Michael. Welcome aboard.
All right. Final item on the agenda this evening is executive session. I'm going to entertain a motion to adjourn into executive session. We're going to need about an hour anyway to get started.
Can I ask for a point of order? Is there a possibility we can go through council update before we go to executive session?
I'm gonna overrule you on that one and suggest that we save that for after executive session.
Okay, all right.
Okay. And that being the case, can I get a motion for adjourning into executive session? I'll read.
All right, so moved.
Second.
Motion, second Moore, that we adjourn into executive session, to discuss personnel matters relating to non-elected personnel. Recessing from council at 8:50, returning at 9:50. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstention? We stand in recess.
I just wanted to say hi, so you could put a face with
Hey,
the...
congratulations.
Congratulations.
You bet.
I almost got up and said something about how you have a great, wonderful...
Can I recognize your name?
And how wonderful you're going to be. Thank you.
Yeah. And I
Yes, he wants to talk about that.
Yeah.
What did they do, just give me the keys?
It was open.
Really? Probably do.
I would entertain a motion to resume regular session.
So moved.
Second.
Motion Shute, second Harrison, that we resume regular session. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
We're back in regular session. Would entertain a motion to adjourn into executive session.
So moved.
Second.
Motion Winters, second
Harrison.
Harrison, that we recess into executive session to discuss personnel matters relating to non-elected personnel, beginning at 9:51 and coming back at 10:51. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstention? We are adjourned. We are in recess. I would entertain a motion to resume regular session.
So moved.
Second.
Motion Moore, second, Shute, that we resume regular session. All in favor, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
We're back in regular session. Entertain a motion to to recess into executive session.
So moved.
Second.
Motion Shute, second Harrison, that we adjourn into, we recess into executive session to discuss personnel matters relating to non-elected personnel, returning at 11:05. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
We stand in recess.